From a Michigan football star who won back-to-back championships, to an Ivy League genius with photographic memory, to a president so dumb he graduated at the bottom of his class twice and still became president. This is every US president's education. And spoiler, while some learned from the most elite institutions in the world, others just taught themselves from scratch, like George Washington, whose education was pretty much non-existent. 'Cause after his father died, little George ditched school to help his mom run the farm. But in his free time, he taught himself math, military strategy, and land surveying, which proved lethal when combined with his near photographic memory. 'Cause during the Revolutionary War, Washington effortlessly recalled troop positions, terrain features, and minor details, outsmarting formerly trained British generals on the battlefield. But for John Adams, it was the total opposite. 'Cause he attended Harvard at just 15 years old and studied math, philosophy, and history. And after graduating near the top of his class, Adams went on to read law under a local attorney, basically the 18th century version of law school. But he wasn't just a brilliant mind, he was a fiery debater, using his masterful rhetorical skills to argue for American independence. But speaking of brilliant minds, Thomas Jefferson studied law at William and Mary College, and oh boy was he a voracious reader, obsessed with everything from architecture to philosophy to languages to science. And when the British burned the Capitol in 1814, Jefferson sold his personal collection of 6,000 books to form the new Library of Congress. But he didn't stop there. He also founded the University of Virginia, personally designing the campus, buildings, and famous rotunda. 'Cause if it wasn't obvious, Jefferson was a polymath, so insanely brilliant that modern psychologists place his IQ around 160, making him one of the smartest presidents in US history. Kinda like James Madison, who went to the College of New Jersey, or what we now call Princeton, where he dove into Latin, Greek, theology, and completed 4 years of classes in 2 years. But unlike Adams, James Madison wasn't fiery in debate. He was quiet, surgical, and never wasted a word. It was this combo of being sharp and disciplined that made Madison the perfect man to architect the US Constitution. But while Madison learned in the classroom, James Monroe learned on the job. 'Cause after 2 years of attending William and Mary, 1776 happened. And Madison was like, "Sorry, professors, there's a revolution going on," and left college to join the Continental Army, where he fought in the Battle of Trenton and crossed the Delaware River with Washington. That's him right here holding the flag. But after the revolution, Monroe was famous for having natural political instincts. He was more EQ than IQ. 'Cause instead of learning from books, Monroe's skill came from people, politics, and practical wisdom. But then came John Quincy Adams, who might be the smartest president in US history. 'Cause as a kid, Lil Adams traveled with his dad throughout Europe and spoke fluent French, Dutch, and a little German. So when he returned home, he breezed through Harvard in 2 years before launching into politics. But to me, the craziest part about Adams was his morning routine. 'Cause he started every day with a nude swim in the Potomac, then read the Bible in its original Greek, and then wrote in his diary, which ended up becoming a 15,000-page journal. And modern researchers believe Adams had an IQ of around 175, the highest of any US president. So if you want to be as smart as Quincy Adams, maybe just do what he did. Woohoo! Cannonball! But unlike the fancy pants presidents we've seen so far, Andrew Jackson grew up on the rugged frontier with pretty much no education outside of elementary school. 'Cause by 15 years old, Jackson was orphaned, broke, and fighting to survive. So he became a school teacher himself while studying law at night. But Jackson's true strengths emerged during the War of 1812, where he out-strategized generals despite having zero military training. 'Cause he was sharp, tough, and street smart. And Jackson applied the same instincts to outmaneuver political opponents and rally the people to his side. So yeah, Jackson didn't have the polish of Adams or Jefferson, but he did have the raw charisma and war hero fame to make him an American legend. kinda like Martin Van Buren, who also didn't come from privilege, cause Van Buren went to a one-room schoolhouse until age 14, then jumped straight into a lawyer's office as an apprentice, where he grinded through legal work for 7 years until being admitted to the bar. And even though he never went to college, Van Buren was a highly skilled lawyer who became New York's Attorney General before the age of 30. However, William Henry Harrison did give college a shot. Kinda. Cause he attended Hampton-Sydney College in Virginia for about a year before moving on to study medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. But after his dad died, money got tight. So he left school and traded the textbooks for a sword and enlisted in the army, where his battlefield career eventually took off. See? Who says he needs school to become president? Oh, hey there. Well, John Tyler's dad set him up for success early. Cause at just 12 years old, he entered the prep program at the College of William and Mary, moved into the main school at 15, and after graduating, studied law under his father, who was a judge. And even though Tyler maybe wasn't as brilliant as the founding fathers, he had solid B-plus energy. But a B-plus didn't cut it for this next president, cause James Polk was the ultimate overachiever. After graduating first in his class at the University of North Carolina, Polk became a lawyer and young congressman. But most impressively, before stepping into the Oval Office, Polk mapped out his entire presidency, promising to accomplish 4 major goals. And guess what? He achieved all 4 in one term, then refused to run again. On the other hand, Zachary Taylor didn't care much about school. He received poor grades, never went to college, and his spelling was horrible. Instead, he joined the army at 23 years old and never looked back, cause instead of reading books, he'd rather lead armies into battle. Charge! But this next president was the definition of self-made, cause even though he grew up in poverty, Millard Fillmore devoured every book he could get his hands on, teaching himself grammar, math, law, and science, and eventually was admitted to the bar in 1823. But although Fillmore never went to college himself, he literally founded the University of Buffalo. And hey, I like that mentality. If you can't go to college, just build one. I hereby grant this diploma to myself. But speaking of higher education, Franklin Pierce entered Bowdoin College at just 15 years old, where he studied classics, philosophy, and became best friends with Nathaniel Hawthorne, the man who'd go on to write the Scarlet Letter. But even though Pierce was a strong student, let's just say he didn't need it, cause he cruised through politics with good looks, charisma, and a gifted speaking ability. Pierce was considered the handsomest man in politics of his day, and oh boy did he know how to use it. I'm standing right here. But on to less attractive presidents, cause James Buchanan graduated from Dickinson College with honors in just 2 years, and afterwards became a lawyer and a highly accomplished diplomat. Too bad those skills didn't translate to the Oval Office. Unlike Abraham Lincoln, who was a natural-born future president, cause although he had almost no formal schooling, Lincoln taught himself everything. He'd spend his nights reading books by the fireplace and pass the Illinois bar entirely on his own. He'd read Shakespeare, the Bible, poetry, and sometimes walked miles just to borrow a book. He even taught himself Euclid geometry just to sharpen his logic.
Ooh.
Like, who does that? So despite having no teacher his entire life, Lincoln became one of the most eloquent, insightful leaders in American history. But if you thought Lincoln had it bad, Andrew Johnson somehow had it worse. Cause after growing up in poverty, Johnson didn't learn to read, write, or do basic arithmetic until he was a teenager, yet managed to teach himself enough law to get admitted to the Tennessee bar. Even so, Johnson used the fake it till you make it strategy to work his way up the political ladder, cause modern historians rank him as one of the lowest IQ presidents. Meanwhile, Ulysses S. Grant received one of the most rigorous educations America had to offer, the United States Military Academy, where he studied engineering, math, and military science. But Grant wasn't exactly a standout. He graduated 21st out of 39 cadets. Nevertheless, the West Point values were drilled into his being, cause during the Civil War, Grant's calm judgment and strategic intelligence allowed him to lead the Union to victory. Proof that sometimes the kid with average grades becomes the one who changes history. And other times, they just blend in with the pack, like Rutherford B. Hayes. 'Cause he graduated valedictorian at Kenyon College before earning his law degree at Harvard. And in his free time, enjoyed classical music, lectures, and the visual arts. So yeah, Hayes wasn't considered a genius, but definitely had a resume that made his parents proud. Unlike this next president, who quite literally was a genius. 'Cause James Garfield graduated from Williams College and immediately started teaching college-level math, Greek, and Latin while studying law on the side. But that's just the beginning. 'Cause Garfield was famously an ambidextrous multilingual. He could write in Latin with one hand and Greek with the other at the same time. And while serving in Congress, Garfield published an original proof of the Pythagorean theorem. But even though IQ tests didn't exist back then, many historians believe Garfield was one of the smartest U.S. presidents, rivaling the intelligence of Thomas Jefferson and John Quincy Adams. If only his presidency didn't get cut short. And Chester A. Arthur became president. A solid, smart guy who graduated from Union College as a top student and eventually passed the bar without law school. So yeah, Arthur was well-educated, polished, and had some of the best presidential facial hair in U.S. history. But let's stay focused, 'cause Grover Cleveland never went to college. He ditched high school early and learned the law the old-fashioned way, by clerking in a Buffalo law office, studying at night, and grinding through legal textbooks until he earned admission to the bar. 'Cause if you couldn't tell, Cleveland was a workhorse. He grinded from lawyer to mayor to governor to president of the United States. Proof that sometimes determination beats a diploma. Which is great news for me, 'cause I barely made it through the Secret Service Academy. Heh but I work hard, sir. I make up for it with work ethic. Don't I? I'm just gonna shut up now. Let's move on to Benjamin Harrison, a well-educated gentleman who graduated near the top of his class at Miami University in Ohio. He studied classics, science, and mathematics, and later attended Cincinnati Law School, where he built a successful law career. Solid credentials, solid career. And well, everything was pretty solid with Harrison. Kinda like William McKinley, who attended Allegheny College before the Civil War pulled him out of the classroom and into the Union Army. And after the war, McKinley graduated from Albany Law School. However, McKinley's true superpower was his remarkable memory for numbers. He could recall tariff data with his feet on the desk. And this was a big deal in a world without calculators. 'Cause it was his brain that propelled the McKinley Tariff, one of the most complex trade laws in U.S. history. But speaking of big brains, Teddy Roosevelt was one of the most highly educated presidents in American history. He graduated from Harvard with honors and briefly enrolled in Columbia Law School before jumping into politics, 'cause sitting still wasn't really his thing. But boy, did Teddy always make time to read. On trains, horseback, and even during meetings. Teddy's reading speed was so legendary, he finished a book a day. And I think that somehow rewired his brain, 'cause he also had a true photographic memory. He could glance at any book and repeat the entire thing weeks later. His memory was so strong, my memory erasing device never worked on him. Sorry, sir. Let's move on to William Howard Taft, who graduated from Yale second in his class and won the gold medal for oratory and the gold medal for civil engineering. But Taft quickly evolved into a constitutional powerhouse. 'Cause after graduating from Cincinnati Law School, he grew to become the best government lawyer of his era. This not only landed him the top job of POTUS, but afterwards, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the only person to ever hold both positions. Teddy Roosevelt even said, "Taft has one of the best legal minds in America. Sound, thorough, and fearless." So yeah, Taft was pretty dang smart. Kinda like Woodrow Wilson, who might have been the most educated president in U.S. history. 'Cause Wilson graduated from Princeton and then earned his Ph.D. in political science from Johns Hopkins. And Wilson loved college so much, he never wanted to leave, 'cause he went on to become a professor and president of Princeton University, which was quite unusual for the time. 'Cause in the late 1800s, only 2% of Americans stepped foot in a college classroom. And somehow, Warren G. Harding was one of them. He started in a one-room schoolhouse, attended Ohio Central College, and became one of the most popular kids on campus. But Harding wasn't much of a scholar. He was a great communicator who preferred giving speeches over reading books. In fact, some studies place Harding among the lowest IQ presidents. But hey, he was likable, and that counts for something, right? Kinda like Calvin Coolidge, who graduated from Amherst College, winning awards for both oratory and debate, which is ironic given that he later became famous for not talking. 'Cause Silent Cow read law, passed the bar, and had a respectable education. But because he was so quiet, people just assumed he didn't know the answers. So modern historians rank him amongst the lowest IQ presidents as a result. Don't worry, Cal, you're more of a silent but deadly type. I like that about you. But let's take things up a notch with Herbert Hoover, who became one of America's earliest STEM millionaires. 'Cause Hoover enrolled in Stanford University's very first class and earned a BS in geology. But after college, he became a world-class mining engineer, traveling the globe, speaking multiple languages, and becoming a self-made millionaire all before entering politics. Hoover was one of the few presidents who turned his education into massive real-world success. Unlike Franklin Roosevelt, who took the classic East Coast elite route. 'Cause he attended the prestigious Groton School, Harvard College, and then Columbia Law School, before dropping out because he thought it was too boring. Psst, sir, wake up, the professor's coming. But even after dropping out, FDR passed the bar and practiced law. He wasn't an academic like Wilson, but more of a brilliant political mind, a master of building coalitions, managing egos, and sensing the public mood. Some things you just can't teach in the classroom. And Harry Truman could absolutely relate, 'cause he briefly attended 2 business colleges in Kansas City before dropping out to work on his parents' farm. You see, Truman didn't need school, he just taught himself. Before 14 years old, little Truman read every book in the local library, practiced piano for 2 hours every day, and had a near photographic memory. Not bad for a kid from rural Missouri. On the other hand, Dwight Eisenhower went to the United States Military Academy and graduated from the famous Class from the Stars, a class that produced a freakishly high number of future generals. What's up, boys? We hitting the weights later? Anyway, there he studied engineering, math, and military tactics, finishing 61st out of 164 cadets, so middle of the pack. 'Cause hey, Eisenhower preferred solving problems on the battlefield. But up next, John F. Kennedy was truly one of a kind. 'Cause he graduated from Harvard, wrote a senior thesis so good it was published as a book, and was a full-on speed reader, cruising through 1,200 words a minute, more than 3 times the average adult rate. But what really set JFK apart was his combo of brains, charm, and charisma. I mean, just look how handsome he is. Looking good today, sir. Mighty fine weather we're having. Meanwhile, Lyndon Johnson graduated from Texas State University and then took night classes at Georgetown Law, but never graduated. Instead, LBJ had an extremely high emotional intelligence. He could walk into a room of 100 senators and instantly know who was angry, scared, or drunk. And once he found your weakness, he would push that pressure point until he got what he wanted. Kinda like Richard Nixon, who graduated from Whittier College and Duke University School of Law. He was disciplined, relentless, and a legitimately talented musician, 'cause he could play piano, violin, saxophone, clarinet, and accordion. He even composed his own piece, which he played with the National Symphony Orchestra. Sir, I feel like no one sees your soft side enough. But while some presidents were in the band, others were on the football team. 'Cause Gerald Ford went to the University of Michigan and was a star football player, captain, and led the Wolverines to 2 national championships. Afterwards, he attended Yale Law School and even coached Yale's football team on the side. Sir, I'm open! I'm open! But while Ford was an All-American student athlete, Jimmy Carter attended Georgia Southwestern College and Georgia Tech, and then earned an appointment to the U.S. Naval Academy, where he studied engineering and naval science until graduating 59th out of 820. But Carter really kicked into overdrive after graduation, 'cause he became a submariner and trained in the Navy's elite nuclear propulsion program, one of the most demanding technical tracks in the US military. Sheesh, this stuff is hard. I'm gonna go work on something a bit easier with my boy Ronald Reagan. 'Cause Reagan graduated from Eureka College with a degree in economics and sociology. He played football, led student protest, and earned a reputation as a decent student. This is a lot more my speed, sir. But even though Reagan went on to become a Hollywood actor, he was also a voracious reader, crushing books every morning and every night. Meanwhile, George H.W. Bush served as a Navy pilot in World War II before attending Yale. He was sharp, disciplined, and developed into one of the smartest foreign policy presidents in U.S. history. I mean, his resume before becoming president was just insane. But speaking of impressive resumes, check out Bill Clinton's background. He graduated from Georgetown University as class president, won the prestigious Rhodes Scholarship and went on to Oxford University, then earned his law degree from Yale, where he was a standout student. And like many other US presidents, Clinton was a voracious reader and had a near photographic memory. Sir, I've been rereading the same sentence for the past 20 minutes. Can you help me out? Anyways, like his father, George W. Bush graduated from Yale University and later got an MBA from Harvard Business School. And yeah, he might not have been the sharpest tool in the shed, but he had the credentials and name recognition to find himself in the most powerful position in the history of the world. Sir, I don't know if you were paying attention earlier. Just don't press the red button, okay? On the flip side, Barack Obama began his college days at Occidental College before transferring to Columbia to get a degree in political science. And afterwards, he enrolled at Harvard Law School, became the first African-American president of the Harvard Law Review, and graduated magna cum laude. Pretty impressive, sir. Yet it was Obama's smarts combined with his natural public speaking skills that really launched him into the White House. Kinda like Donald Trump, 'cause he attended Fordham University for 2 years before transferring to the Wharton School at UPenn, where he graduated with a degree in economics. And sure, his grades were average, but Trump would never admit that, 'cause his real strengths showed up in the business world, where he had a strong name-face memory, elite marketing instincts, and even his critics acknowledge very high social intelligence. Trump could improv with reporters, verbally spar with opponents, and work a crowd like a stand-up comedian. In fact, one of his jokes aimed at the next president's education. 'Cause Joe Biden graduated in the bottom 25% of his class at the University of Delaware, and then in the bottom 12% of his class at Syracuse Law. But hey, Biden's pretty open about his mediocre performance, chalking it up to partying, playing sports, and cramming for tests at the last minute. Isn't that what most of us did in college anyway? You're just like us, sir. But speaking of doing the job with a hangover, this is every US president's favorite drink. From showing up hammered at inauguration, to installing a secret Diet Coke button in the Oval Office, to pre-gaming cabinet meetings with orange Gatorade. These beverages are so crazy, you'll be wondering how anyone did their job sober. Except me, 'cause I'm always sober, professional, and definitely not hiding a flask in my jacket. But if anyone asks, it's just Red Bull. So click this video and keep watching.